Hi, my name is Sheldon McLeod, and this is Thinking Out Loud, my podcast here on SaltWire. Now, I've been covering politics since around for a long time here in Nova Scotia. And why is this important to discuss? Because context is king. And in order to understand why something is important, it's important to look back. And the last time a provincial MLA crossed the floor to join another party in Nova Scotia was in 2011. Karen Casey, leaving the Progressive Conservatives to join the Liberals. Now, this latest floor crossing is somewhat different. As reported by SaltWire, Halifax-Atlantic MLA Brendan Maguire crossed the floor to become a Progressive Conservative on Thursday. But that's not it. That's not the only thing. Premier Tim Houston immediately named Maguire the new Minister of Community Services. He took that cabinet post that was vacated by Cape Breton MLA Trevor Boudreau just moments earlier. A news release was sent out saying that was the case and that the Richmond member was stepping away from cabinet because of health reasons. What does it all mean? Well, that's what I wanted to know, and I wanted to speak with an expert about it. Coming up, it's my chat with Dr. Lori Turnbull, professor in the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. This is my podcast, Thinking Out Loud, presented by SaltWire. Please like and subscribe. It's not unusual for a politician to switch parties. It is more than a little unusual for them to go from opposition into cabinet. Dr. Lori Turnbull is a political science professor with Dalhousie University. She joins us here today. Do you ever remember anything quite like this happening?
Yes. Remember when in 2006, David Emerson ran for the Liberals in Vancouver Kingsway? And his election, he won as a Liberal, and his election night speech was about how he was going to make Stephen Harper, like he was going to be Stephen Harper's worst nightmare, and he was all partisan and everything. And then when Harper's cabinet was sworn in January, Emerson showed up and he was a minister. So yes, it totally happens. I remember the time that, what's her name? Belinda Stronach went from the Conservative benches to be part of Paul Martin's cabinet right before a budget. So yes, the world of politics is a crazy place.
Now, in recent memory, in Nova Scotia, Karen Casey was a member of the Progressive Conservative Caucus. She was a Minister of Education. She crossed the floor to the Liberals, but it took until after the next election, which she ran for the Liberals and won, and then was once again returned to the cabinet as the Minister of Education. She served as that minister in both a PC and a Liberal government. There's a lot of talk about what should or should not happen. Fundamentally, what does Lori Turnbull say about someone who's elected under one banner and crosses the floor to sit with another party?
Okay. So for me, my initial reaction is, as an MP or an MLA who is not a minister, you have so few choices about what you can do. Whatever party you sit in is going to expect you to toe the line and carry the banner and be disciplined and vote with the party and support the leadership and do all this. About one of the only choices you can make is which party you sit with. And to me, if we expect an MP or an MLA to sit with a party with whom they are not comfortable and with a leader with whom they are not comfortable, that's not right. And the MP or MLA, in this case, the MLA obviously, is going to have to come back to his voters and explain why he did what he did. And it's up to him to make that argument. And if the voters agree with him, or enough of them agree with him, then great. And if not, he's going to see the door. And so it doesn't bother me.
And someone asked, whether you have the mandate to do so. The social media platform X, formerly Twitter, it's kind of mixed today. I had one person who said, well, you know what? We love him. We'll vote for him no matter what. Another person said, yeah, I voted for him, but now that he's crossed the floor, I'm not going to support him. And for Nova Scotia's Progressive Conservative government under Tim Houston, which is mostly, not exclusively, a rural party, what does this signal to you that the Premier was willing to either make this offer? We assume it was from the desk of Tim Houston, considering he was posing for pictures for the press immediately afterwards. So what does that say to you about his thought process? Not that we can get inside of his head, though. Obviously.
Yeah, we can't get inside to either of their heads, and we can't really be flies in the wall in a conversation that already happened. That said, I think for Tim Houston, this is a massive win. This is a big get for him. This is somebody who was elected first, I think, in 2013, was a minister under a Liberal government, and when most of the people, or a lot of the people who were around Stephen McNeil for his government, and kind of when he indicated he wasn't going to reoffer, and even before he indicated he was going to walk away, a number of them said they are not going to run again. Like, a lot of that brain trust in that government has left. And so to see that Brendan Maguire was someone who was a part of all that, and now he's leaving that to join Tim Houston's government. And this is an HRM seat. This is an area that Houston certainly wants to break into, and part of the vulnerability, such as to the extent that a majority government has a vulnerability. But he doesn't have so many seats in Halifax, right? So like, this is not insignificant for him to convince somebody in an HRM seat to come and join him on the government. Well, on the government side with a cabinet post. Maybe that's not so difficult, right? Like, and sure, like there'll be questions around that. Like, it went to, and not that I want to, escalate something, but like, it went to the ethics commissioner when David Emerson crossed the floor from the Liberal side to join the Conservatives, and he got a cabinet post in the process. Several MPs referred it to the ethics commissioner and said, like, this guy's on the, like, he did this for himself, for his own personal gain, because like in the assertion was almost like he got like bribed with a cabinet post, right? That, I don't mean that in an illegal way, but like, there's an issue here in that he was supposed to be sitting with the party, and the constituency office worked their butt off to get him elected. And then once he got in there, he bailed from an offer for a prime minister who he said he hated because there was a cabinet post.
And certainly Brendan Maguire has been outspoken. In fact, he had been tossed out of the House of Assembly. So it'll be interesting to see what now his position is on a lot of these issues that he had problems with when it came to government, since it's always easier on the inside than it is on the outside to make change. I want to read you, and I don't know if you heard this or read this yet, but the statement from the Liberal leader, Zach Churchill. Did you see what they released?
No.
Okay, so here's and this is very surprising to me. Statement from leader Zach Churchill on MLA Brendan Maguire. I've served with Brendan for 10 years, and I admire his passion for his community. While I'm sad to see him leave our caucus, I know Nova Scotian. I know he shares our concerns about the affordability crisis. To date, the Houston government has made decisions to worsen food insecurity and govern poverty, and I hope that in his new role, Brendan is able to reverse that trend to help low and middle income Nova Scotians. That doesn't sound like the leader of an opposition that's just lost one of its members. What does that in any way suggest to you about Zach Churchill's thoughts on this move?
That statement strikes me as conciliatory and civilized, and a person who's like, it sounds to me like he's just not wanting to draw any negative attention to himself. Like, what, to me, it's like, what else can he say? Like, he could go on, walk up to the mic and say, Maguire betrayed me, but he'd sound petulant to do that. Like, I mean, what else can he say? There's nothing he can do about it. Like, this is done.
What does, if anything, this speak to the effectiveness of the Liberal parties, or at least their chances? We're, a year and 6 months, 3 months, 4 months away from a provincial election in Nova Scotia. What does this say anything about Zach Churchill to you?
Well, it strikes me that Brendan Maguire was not happy in particular caucus, and the Liberals just had their AGM where Zach Churchill came out with this announcement around, if they are the government, they're going to take 2 points off the GST. It doesn't surprise me that wasn't something that kept Maguire in the fold. Like, I get that. And so I think it's probably the case that Zach Churchill's problem is going to be, in the next election, unless something very strange happens, it's going to be trying to secure the official opposition status against Claudia Chender. I don't think he's unless, and I don't want to predict the outcome of the next election, but if history repeats itself and we give a government a second term, well, what is Zach Churchill fighting for? Like, he's fighting to be the official opposition. He's fighting to beat Claudia Chender as the person that his voters most trust to hold the government to account.
One of the things that we had not mentioned, though, was that Trevor Boudreau announced that he was stepping away from cabinet for health reasons. but staying on in caucus. And again, it was just a matter of moments that the Progressive Conservative government from the Premier's office sent out the statement that that vacancy was going to be filled by a former Liberal member of the House. I don't know anything about this man or his health, but he was part of the shuffle just a few months ago that he was introduced to cabinet. There was a bit of controversy with the Premier's comments around the municipality of Cape Breton's calling for a state of emergency during a snowstorm and accused it of being a PR stunt. And, it's all really, just connecting dots that may or may not even have any relevance to each other than, I don't know if this man's health is in a position where it's not well. Why else would you accept a cabinet position and then a few months later decide it's not for me?
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know anything about this person's personal situation or health situation or anything like that. So yeah, I can't really say anything about that.
So do we have a right to know, or does it matter?
For myself, people's health situations are not. I don't feel like I have the right to know that at all. Particularly if I don't think there's a right to know that. That's me. That's where I'm at on that. And I've always kind of been that way. Especially if there was anything that could potentially affect his ability to do his job as a cabinet minister, and he's moved out of it. It's no business of ours.
And purely speculative, if you get into a position, you say, I don't like it, and maybe it's not for me. This is a way. Again, I don't know any more than you do, and I'm certainly not I wish him well if he has health concerns, and that to say that people are really skeptical of all politics these days, and motivations and how people get to where they're going. So Tim Houston has had a fairly successful run so far, and moving towards the next election, and I have to wonder if. Every government in this country, in fact, probably in much of the developed world, is dealing with issues of homelessness and dealing with food insecurity and dealing with poverty issues and pocketbook issues. Is this just, are we going to forget about this? Brendan Maguire is the guy who's now in some ways looked at as he's going to have to deal with some of this. Yeah,
I mean, to me, the ideological stretch between political parties in Nova Scotia is not terribly long. It's not like he has left one party and joined another party that has a completely different values base, and there's reason to wonder where his priorities are and all that. I really don't see that. I think that any of these people could probably find a happy enough spot in another political party, because most of the political parties are talking about the affordability crisis, the housing crisis, the healthcare crisis, and what are we going to do about this? And given the economic constraints on the province, the question is more usually about how are we going to solve these things as opposed to what the problems are. And so I can't really say that this is going to be something that strikes me as an inexplicable stretch by any stretch. And so I think probably people will just kind of get on with it, is my guess, right? And some people may not. Some people who don't like this particular, and if there are people who are in his riding who don't like it, well, they're not going to get over it. They're going to be mad, and at the next election, they're going to say, "What the hell? What were you thinking?" And sure, that's all of these things are completely understandable. But as a news story in Nova Scotia, no, this will be like anything else. People will start thinking about something else and move on.
Saw the comment, Liberal Tory, same old story. So does this present an opportunity for Claudia Chender and the NDP?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I mean, not because, and she doesn't have to say anything. She doesn't have to even notice this happened, but just acknowledge, that there's, this is a lousy day for Churchill and the Liberals. And I think that, to go back to the point that Churchill made, he doesn't want to make it any more lousy. He's been in politics a long time too. And so the last thing he wants to do is to seem sour about it, because that's going to look like, he's shedding light on why Maguire might not have been happy there if the leader is not recognizing and not respecting the autonomy of his members, right? If Maguire wants to do this, this is his business. And I think time will tell whether this is a smooth transition or not. For Karen Casey, that seemed to just be, it made headlines for a day or two, and that was it. And then it was like, Okay. And I think people just sort of forgot that she was ever with another political party. Like maybe she didn't, but it wasn't a big deal. Like, whereas some of them that just seem really politically motivated, they can stick that. Like Eve Adams was never, she wasn't crossing for a cabinet position, but when Eve Adams left the Conservatives to join the Liberals, that was never a logical move for a lot of people, right? And so that was always like an eyebrow raiser. And then when she tried to get the nomination against Margot Mendocino, that was a no-go. Right. So
in Nova Scotia's history, we had Scott Bryson elected as a Conservative who then became a Liberal. We had Lenore Zann, who was the MLA for the New Democrats in Truro, in fact, ran for the leadership of the party, left provincial politics to run for the Liberals federally and was not successful. So it's not unusual for people to look down the road. And I'll always remember something that Graham Steele, former NDP finance minister in Nova Scotia, said, is that in many cases, people choose politics. They've probably been asked by all of the parties at one point or another to run before they make their decision. In a year interview, the Premier of Nova Scotia said people join politics either A, because they're asked, or B, because they're passionate over something. Now, Tim Houston said he joined because he was passionate about something else. Is Tim Houston the least conservative, progressive conservative you've ever seen?
Okay, so like I think there is still a red Tory. There's life to red Toryism and it exists in Atlantic Canada. I'm not sure. Like you could put Dennis King in a kind of similar category, I think, where these are pragmatic people who believe that government is there to do something quote unquote good. And you're not going to see a whole lot of lines from Doug Ford's playbook that Tim Houston is going to pick up and use. And you're sure as hell not going to see any lines from Danielle Smith's playbook that Tim Houston's going to pick up and use. And he said himself in the 2021 election that he has more in common with Justin Trudeau than he did with then Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. And so I don't think he's trying to align himself as a Conservative at all. And in some ways, though, even though I think he and Doug Ford, for example, in Ontario are very different people, even Ford stays away from mentions of conservatism. You can see a lot of provincial premiers, I think, who are moving away from being party branded and who are trying to appeal more on the basis of their own, here are my values, here's what I want to do, and here's what I think is important for the province. And that might not be a bad thing. Like it's certainly destabilizing a bit for political parties where we typically see parties go from one leader to the next and the party stays constant and you're just kind of switching the helm. Whereas now I think it's more of the party rebuilds itself around a new leader because the party then takes the shape of the values of the leader and the personality too.
And I guess to close this off, I thought it was very interesting that Tim Houston took a lot of time to put distance between himself and the federal Conservative Party of Canada, but yet during the by-election in Preston was quick to say, well, that the provincial Liberals support the federal carbon tax, basically saying that the Nova Scotia Liberals are the same as the federal Liberals, even though he wants to put some space between himself and, I assume, Pierre Poilievre and the PC Party of today, or the Conservative Party of Canada today. So I don't know what that says other than I noticed it, and I'm sure other people have as well.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And we can see a lot of that happening across the country where Conservative politicians in particular are being measured in how they fit with one another, right? So like if Blaine Higgs says something about pronouns and says something about identity, people look to see what other provincial premiers are saying. They look to see how Pierre Poilievre puts himself, how he aligns himself with comments like that. And so I think we're still figuring out what different Conservative premiers stand for. It'll be interesting to see if Pierre Poilievre becomes Prime Minister, how he creates and maintains relationships with provincial Conservatives. Because his relationship with Houston I would assume, be very different than the one he's going to have with Smith. Absolutely.
And I guess, we're some time away from an election and, the whole issues south of the border and politics there. There's a lot of criticism about journalism and journalism schools right now, saying that they're creating, or there's this idea it's creating activists that people are not entering to report, but to try and move public opinion or move policy. What's it like teaching political science students in 2024 when it comes to this vast difference between ideologies and maybe even the real world lived experience?
Yeah, I'm on teaching release right now, but I still talk to students a lot. And yeah, I mean, like, to me, it's always been valuable to have an ongoing laboratory. As a political scientist, there's always stuff going on. There's always ways to contribute to dialogue. It's going on in public. You can always connect the concepts that you're using in class to what's going on outside of class. And so that stuff is really valuable, I hope, for students. But at the same time, we're living in a very complicated world. The disinformation aspect alone, the willingness and the ability of many political actors to proliferate content that is untrue or partly true, or just a kind of creative interpretation of something that causes a distorting effect, that really has a lot of impact on how democracy is operationalized and how voters come to this exercise. And when trust is broken, it's very difficult for voters to continue to participate. It's like there are very damaging effects, I think, and politicians are stewards of these institutions, and they are supposed to be, leaving them in good shape when they go on to their next office, kind of thing. But we can see, I think, a lot of attacks on each other, but also attacks on the institutions that we're all supposed to be protecting.